Alright guys, hey, it's Kevin. It is Sunday. Some of you have asked for kind of just a video overview of the truck, and I figured since there's no racing going on this weekend, we'll go ahead and do that. So, just a quick recap. This is an 86 Ford Ranger, single cab with an extended bed. Bought it for $300 off of Craigslist. It didn't run. So I bought it. It ended up just needing some fluid in the clutch reservoir, and it was able to start, and I was able to part out the 2.9 liter V6 and the transmission for $450. So just getting rid of the drivetrain got me netted me up $150 with about a day's worth of work. So moving on to the truck itself, it has a 2014 5.0 Coyote in it, with a 6R80 out of a F-150. 2014, it has 102,000 miles on it. So a little bit of use. It was actually, I got it off of Copart. It was a totaled parts truck from a Ford dealership. It had some rear end damage. I think it bent the frame, but the drivetrain itself was pretty much untouched. So we'll just kind of go through, talk about some of the stuff I've done, and you guys can put up any questions you might have. So looking at the motor here, pretty much all stock. Only thing that's missing is going to be the stock air filter there on the right hand side. As far as the wiring harness goes, the fuse box right here was actually sitting on top of the radiator in the F-150. Obviously with the smaller engine bay that didn't work, so I had to route the harness kind of forward by the headlights and then wrap it back around the engine to make it all fit, without having to do a whole bunch of wiring harness modifications. The radiator is the radiator of the F-150. Required some cutting of the body here, as you can see on the Ranger, to make it fit and then still have clearance down below between the crank and then the back of the fans. We'll just go around the truck this way. Stock size battery, didn't want to mess with that at all. Wasn't looking to spend any money yet on a lightweight racing battery. So stock battery, this is just a universal battery tray off of Summit Racing, so that it is held down and tight. Coming around, let's see, got some Race Star wheels. I think they're model 82s if I remember correctly, but you'll have to look on Race Star's website for that. Nothing really of note. Walking along this side of the truck, looking in the bed here, got a 15-gallon fuel cell. Originally I was going to try to retain the stock fuel tank and move it to back behind the axle to kind of help with putting some weight over the rear. However, when I pulled apart the entire fuel system out of the F-150 with all the evap sensors and fuel pressure sensors along the way, it ended up being too much of a pain trying to retain all the stock equipment, so I ended up spending a little bit of money to get the fuel tank. So it's 15-gallon. I don't remember who manufactures it. I want to say Rhodes Race Cars off the top of my head, but I'm not 100% certain which brand I actually went with. It's return style system. So coming out of the tank, it has a, I believe, a -10 line going to a, I believe it's an Aeromotive. It's either an Aeromotive or AEM fuel pump. I'd have to look at the manufacturer. It goes in that, and then it comes out -6, and it's braided steel hose all the way up to the fuel rail there. And we'll get under the truck and look at that a little bit. Coming around the back, so we got 15-inch DOT legal. They're Mickey Thompson ET Street R's. They have just a little bit of tread on them. You can see them there. So they are DOT approved. However, I would not try them at all in the rain. Coming around the back here, we'll look at the rear end. So the rear end is a, it's an 8.8 out of a mid-90s Ford Explorer. It turns out that the mid-90s Explorers, if you take the rear axle out and then make the axle tubes equal length, they end up fitting perfectly under a Ranger for a Ranger swap. A lot of the guys that use these older Rangers for off-roading actually do this swap to beef up the rear end, because originally it was a 7.5 inch. So the axle tubes here are now equal length so that the drivetrain is nice and centered, and it's got a nice Ford Racing girdle on it to try to give it some strength. I have not touched the suspension at all in terms of the leafs and the shocks. Those are what came with the truck when I bought it, and since we're not putting a whole lot of power through it, we'll see how it holds up once we switch out the converter and everything over the winter. You can kind of see here, and we'll catch it on the side, just underneath the leaves there, you can see that it has some traction bars on it. They're not Caltrax, they're actually called Assassin's bars. I don't remember the manufacturer, but if you Google Assassin's bars, that's what you'll find. Coming around the side here, so we'll take a better look at the Assassin bars. They're pretty much the same thing as Caltrax, but they were super awesome to work with. They actually made these custom length for me, since these are normally used on late 60s, early 70s type muscle cars for racing. So it has the adjustable Heim here, and then you can pre-tension it. It has adjustable holes for getting your preload on there, whether or not you want it to hit harder, or as the leaf rebounds, if you want it to stick a little bit better after that initial hit. Come to the Driveshaft. Driveshaft is custom. It's from the Driveshaft shop out of, was it Driveshaft shop or Driveline Specialties? I'll have to look again, and I will get you the manufacturer, but they're out of Texas. Super awesome. The turnaround on it was about a week after I ordered it, which was super awesome. Their customer support via email was awesome. I actually talked to them on the phone a little bit to try to figure out what size wall tubing and material I wanted. So we ended up going with a little bit thicker of a steel tube there to support the higher horsepower once we throw a turbo on the truck. Let's see, going along here, you can kind of see up front, got a drive shaft loop that I fabbed up just to keep it safe at the track. They are checking for those at the tracks I'm going for, so that is really just a good idea overall. The fuel pump, I'm not going to crawl underneath right here, but it's just behind the frame rail here above the transmission support. This transmission support is actually the stock one. Out of the Ranger, I just had to relocate it and kind of fabricate the two transmission mounts, so half Ranger, half F-150, to get it to mount properly there against the back of the 6R80 transmission. Alright, coming into the cab here, completely stripped out. There's hardly anything stock left. It still has the glass windows with the crank. But looking inside here, I've got a Kirky racing seat. It's all aluminum, mounted to a bracket I made that ties directly into the frame rail underneath. 5-point harness. It does have a cross brace to attach the shoulder straps to. That brace is actually wider than the cab, so it actually goes into the sheet metal and has a little bit extra strength there, and that is welded in. In the center for safety, got my fire extinguisher there, just in case. Hopefully never have to use it. 5-point harness again for safety, and then as always when I go to the track, I always wear a fire jacket, long pants, and a helmet. Looking at the controls here, so pull the stock steering wheel and gauge cluster out. The intent here was to try to minimize the amount of issues we would have with the truck and the computer, with all the sensors and everything being unplugged. And honestly, I was just trying to save a little bit of money with the dash, so I didn't have to buy any gauges. It's just a plug and play modular system. Right now it is just zip tied in, so it has a little bit of play to it, but eventually it will get permanently mounted to a dash once a cage goes in. Got my end gauge mounted here in the middle so I can get all the info that I want. While I am racing, monitor some important stuff like knock and the fuel ratio, and also makes it super easy to data log and tune. Other than that, all stock controls, got blinker, got headlights, hazards. It is a column mounted shifter, and on the back is actually where I have my line lock. So push the button and then the red light comes on over in the corner, and you can hear the click of the solenoid activating. Down below here, got the stock pedals from both the brake and the gas. The gas is electronic, so it's just mounted as a modular unit, and the brake pedal I have hooked up to a manual brake solenoid. And then the rest of the truck here, actually the dash is actually mounted, so I cut out the dash support from the F-150. You can see the vertical brace here, and then it ties in over to the side of the truck just by the firewall. And the rest of it in here is just all of the old wiring harness just kind of laying on the floor. It doesn't go anywhere. It's held in pretty well between zip ties, and then all the grounds go into the body, and then that's the ECU. Just with the wiring harness and the way it worked out, there's not a whole lot of room in the engine bay, so I ended up running those wires through the firewall and keeping that here in the cab with me just to maximize the amount of room. And then I have a couple patches in the firewall there for the where the AC and heater used to come through, but those were deleted. Coming back around to the engine bay here, a lot going on this side. So over here, a lot going on. Got the the steering column out of the F-150 tying down into the electronic steering rack. Got my manual brake reservoir here from Willwood. It's a single output. I have it split, and then I have it running into a brake bias controller there so that I can adjust how much goes to the front and rear. Got my anti-roll control by Moroso, so that was the button you guys just saw. And then the fuel pressure regulator, I don't remember who makes this one. I don't remember which brand I ended up buying, but it's been working really well. It's set to about 55 to 57 psi. It is boost referenced here, so when we do end up putting a turbo on it, it'll be boost referenced, and it works out really well. I've had no issues with it. Once I got it all sealed up with some liquid Teflon tape on especially on this boost reference gauge here. Again, all braided AN line. This up here is all AN6, and it ties into these stock fuel rails. Currently, the wiper motor is not hooked up yet. I haven't dealt with that, but that is something that I will end up doing so that it can be one day a street legal truck and we can drive it on the street. And finally, looking underneath here, you can kind of see it. It's a little dark. All right, not terrible. So the headers, basically all I did was take the stock headers off of the F-150, change the angle of the output from the actual header, and then used some of the remaining tubing from the exhaust system to basically make dumps that come out the wheel well here. So there's one O2 sensor so that the computer stays happy, and then it's about a foot down to dump, and it dumps right out the bottom and back of the wheel well there. So when I do drive it, I always wear earplugs because it is quite loud. And finally, underneath the truck, it's hard to see with the garage light, but it does have, I had to build a little bracket there out of square tubing to mount the electronic power steering tube. Because the F-150 is wider, I actually had to end up cutting the length of the rod ends down a little bit, and then using the stock Ranger knuckle. It's hard to see there, but some pretty heavy welding to make those two work together, combining the Ranger knuckle with the F-150 steering rack. Other than that, the truck sits as it came from Craigslist about 3 years ago. Mismatched body panels, super rusty hood. The roof is all spotty from sap and stuff hitting it. The bed is super rusted out. But the intent is that it's a sleeper look. I never intend to change the hood out unless I absolutely have to, but I'm hoping to keep it all underneath the hood, make it look as unassuming as possible, except for the racing sticker and the big and littles on it. So if you guys have any questions, I'll try to post a comprehensive parts list of what I can find at the link below. And if you guys have any questions, shout them out. Hope this answers all your questions. Keep following the build, like, share, subscribe, and we'll talk to you later.